a moment. We would like it to be more interactive, so we would love your questions. You can cut us off in the middle and type in on the chat any question that you have, and we'll try to take them as they come. Again, hoping that we'll have a little bit more interaction and people will feel like they're getting their questions answered. Also, we're going to talk about emotional intimacy tonight. And this is like a huge topic. It's no little thing. I mean, so we want to cover it in kind of three parts. We're going to talk a little bit about what is emotional intimacy. And then we're going to talk about what are the obstacles to having emotional intimacy, some of them. And then we want to talk about how can we be more emotionally intimate, emotionally connected. So these are really, really powerful conversations because in our practice as couples therapists, I would say this is on top of the list of one of the single most difficult challenges that couples face. So I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're all willing to grow and together, and we're looking forward to having a conversation together. You want to say anything?
No, I think, as you alluded to, emotional intimacy is a huge topic because I think at its core is the basis of where relationships break down. And when we talk about why we lose emotional intimacy, we'll talk about some of those reasons why. But I think if I think about like all of our, where did we go? Everything went green. Are we okay, Sarah? Okay. If I think about all of our therapeutic work, at the foundation is a lack of emotional intimacy. So it's a big topic. I think we're going to try our best to cover some of the basic foundations. And our intention tonight is to have you walk away with maybe a deeper understanding, but most importantly, maybe one or two ideas of things that you could do to create more intimacy. So I would suggest that you have pen and paper handy just in case an idea comes to mind to write it down. Okay.
That's good. All right. So what is emotional intimacy anyway? So, the way I look at emotional intimacy, it has a lot to do with feeling, I'm going to just throw out some words, safe, feeling understood, feeling connected, feeling like you can share just about anything of your feelings and your thoughts with your partner, and that it'll be okay, it'll be safe, it'll be received well. It's a experience of being and feeling able to be vulnerable in a relationship, which essentially means to be yourself, to really feel like you can just be yourself with another person. And that can be a friend or a partner or a romantic partner. And so this feeling of vulnerability is really saying to your partner, I feel like I can be seen with you. I feel like you see me. And I remember the first time that somebody broke down the word intimacy for me. And it was like a shock. I mean, most of you have heard it by now, but into me you see, intimacy. And it really is amazing because it is looking and seeing someone. When somebody feels a connection of intimacy, they feel like you can see them and they can be seen. They feel like you can hear them and you can be heard. It feels like you can feel them, connect deeply with them. So these are sort of the definition that we think of when we think of emotional intimacy. So it's something that we are all striving for. We never have all the time, but we're all trying to get closer and closer to that kind of connection. Do you want to add anything?
No, I guess I would say that you have it when it just feels good. And so when you first meet, you naturally have it. I mean, if you're lucky, you don't want to not have it and continue on very long because it's really easy in the beginning to have that kind of intimacy because all the other issues don't get in the way. So when you have it in a more mature relationship, you know you're on the right track because it just feels good.
It feels good. And that's a
Yeah.
good point. You know it. You know you have it when it feels good.
And
That's
if
it
it
just
doesn't feel good, then you know that somehow it's been.
yeah.
And today we'll talk about ways to get it back. And really, like, not to tout our book, but a lot of, if I look at our book or any book on relationships, it's all about how to reconnect
Right,
for love and
right,
connection.
right. You know it when you're in it. You know it when you're in it. Emotional intimacy is just something you experience.
It's funny. Think about, I love looking at babies. And why? It's because they're the only ones that I know that have consistently good eye contact. You ever notice that? Like a baby will look you right in the eyes and smile.
Mm,
And it's a beautiful thing. It's because the ego really hasn't dropped in yet. And so there's pure love and connection. And at our core, we've talked about this before, we are love and connection. We lose our way for a variety of reasons. And then we think that where we end up is really the reality of who we are, when in fact, it's that beautiful place that we are when we're babies.
mm.
And tonight we're going to be talking about like how to get back to that self, that loving, beautiful self.
So we want to talk a little bit about what gets in the way of emotional intimacy. Where do we lose our way with emotional connection? Um, so that makes me think of a couple of different reasons, and jump in, okay? Because I
Okay.
want you to also help me with this.
Okay.
Um, the first reason is a little complicated. It has to do with we lose it as children. We lose it when we are told that we shouldn't feel. We lose it when we're told by usually our parents that it's not safe to experience our feelings, or that in some way we're wrong to think a certain way or feel a certain way. And as soon as that happens, we begin to shut down and turn off those feelings
Mhm.
or those connections with our feelings. It's not that we don't have them, we are all born with all of the feelings. But as time goes on, depending on how we are raised in our family of origin, we're going to continue to expand on those feelings and nurture those feelings, or we're going to start to close down from those feelings. And many of us have grown up in families where it wasn't safe to feel. We were told, in one way or another, that if you feel a certain way, I'm going to reject you, or I'm going to abandon you, or you're going to end up, in worst case scenario, get hurt. So, was it safe to really explore your feelings as a child and be open to them? I have met a number of couples where the men, typically the men, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, um, and sometimes women, the
Mhm.
parents never said, I love you. Never. I mean, never, because it wasn't okay.
Or maybe they said it, but it didn't have any heartfelt meaning. It was more obligatory,
Yeah,
probably because that's how they learned to say it.
exactly. So, of course, you end up with a couple in our office, and the wife would like their partner to just be able to express those feelings of love, and they're completely stuck because it feels so unnatural because it was never said to them. So, there's a lot of reasons in childhood why we don't learn to be emotionally connected, and it's shut off pretty early on for many. So, that would be one main reason. Another reason that I think is a cultural reason, and it's huge in our society, and I really am so happy to see that there's some men on this call, because men typically would not come to a presentation like this. It would just be, probably something that they feel is kind of ridiculous. Emotional intimacy for men has been something that has the flavor of weakness, because a lot of men will equate emotional intimacy with vulnerability. And vulnerability is something that men don't really have a need or a desire or a want to participate in. And in other words, a lot of men see vulnerability as a weakness. So they do everything they can to push against that. And there's a reason. You see, probably 40 years ago, women went through a cultural revolution where they became quite liberated in so many ways, and things changed for women radically in our society. And the truth is that men never went through a cultural revolution of their own. They never really understood what it meant to meet the new needs, and I'll say new needs of women who no longer were going to accept that emotional intimacy was not going to be part of their relationship. So the problem was that men really were not educated or didn't really understand because they were still going by their old job description.
When I used to teach at the Global Institute for Leadership Development, we
Mhm.
had many of you probably know Brené Brown, and it was right when she came out with her YouTube, and so she was hot and really really popular. So we had like, let's see, we had maybe I don't know, 1,000 people there, and she was one of our lead speakers, and most people loved her. Certainly, all the women did. But what was so interesting about that day is I was standing at the back of the room and I was watching people come out. And again, this is when she first came out with her YouTube that was so popular. And I watched the men, and it was a lot of men, right?
Mm.
And some I would ask, like, so what did you think? And I got a lot of this, like,
Yeah.
so, and that was like not that many years ago.
Yeah.
So I think what you're talking about is just so profoundly important that even in this day and age, I mean, the women went through a revolution years ago, but men are just raised to kind of man up.
Yeah.
And emotions just become expressing the truth of what's going on
Mhm.
becomes immaterial, not immaterial, but not as important.
Mhm.
And they're taught to fix the problem.
Right.
Go out there and make it happen. If something breaks down, you're the person that has to like fix it for the sake of your family.
Right.
And so the
Exactly.
messaging about connecting with another person and talking about what's really going on inside just never lands for them. And there's a lot of resistance about it. And so
Yeah.
as I was watching these men leave, I just like there was a sadness,
Yeah.
like, wow, there's so much room for men to step into that they haven't done yet. Not all of
Yeah.
them, but
Not
a
all
lot
of
of
them.
them.
A lot of them. Yeah. Not you, Steve.
Well, actually, we were thinking of you as you were saying that.
No, I mean it's true. It's been a rough path for men, and I think that they're starting to come along. And again, I'll say it's not because they don't have feelings. It's just been they're acculturated not to explore and express their feelings. We all heard the song by Four Seasons early on. Big boys don't cry. We're trained not to cry. We're trained not to feel. We're raised that way, and then we get into a relationship with a woman who wants to express, wants to feel, wants to have emotional connection, and we feel kind of stuck. We're at a loss. And what do we do? So it's been an interesting journey to work, and I work with I work with couples, only couples, and I would say 9 out of 10 times, emotional intimacy or emotional connection is the driving issue. So, and it's because, and I'll have to say, and it's not a ditch. I'm not ditching men. I'm just saying that it's just so hard for them sometimes. So a lot of the work we do in couples therapy is working to help men feel more emotionally connected.
Right.
Right.
But we as women don't really have the skills to help them along.
Yeah.
I think there's a breakdown there. It's
Mm.
just like we live in complaint about it,
Yeah.
but we don't have the skills. And so that's what we're going to be talking about
Yeah.
today.
Yeah.
Right.
So we want to talk a little bit about, and feel free with any questions. We'd love to hear from you. You can type them into the chat room. We want to talk about how do you cultivate emotional intimacy? How do we bring more of that into our relationship? Oh, we have a question. Do we?
I think.
Yes, I have a question.
Oh, perfect. Look at that. It works.
Yeah, it works. So you're talking about men and how, there are all these stereotypes of what men are supposed to be and so forth. We haven't talked about what the same stereotype or what stereotype there might be for women.
Yeah.
During this same time frame.
Right.
And how that plays into the equation.
Good question. Thank you. I appreciate that question a lot. You want me to start? You want to take it?
Well, I think It was funny that you mentioned that, Joe, because as we were talking about it, I thought it sounds like it's the men that are kind of shut down to their emotions and not the women. But that's really not the case, that there are many women who have learned through their cultural training or experience to shut down. And so this problem is not male or female, but I think the reason we're focusing on it because we just see it a lot with men. And so typically, but not all the time, men are out there trying to make things happen and they want to fix it. And so they're not as aware of the emotional underpinnings that are important in a relationship. And a lot of times you get the woman's in the same situation because of
Mm.
how she was raised. And so now you've got two people, and it often happens that way. Two people that are emotionally limited. And so the foundation of why that exists, which usually goes back to childhood, is not seen because our childhood wounds are often unconscious to us.
Yeah.
And, so for example, if I had a father, and you know what I find, and I don't know about you, but I find that a lot of times we mirror the dysfunction that we experienced in our lives, right? So, if I have like my father was fantastic, but he was emotionally cut off. He was raised to go out there and make it happen. And so he didn't even know like the word emotion. It just wasn't his vocabulary. So I grew up not having a lot of access to that myself. And it was only through time that I started learning like what emotions were and how you deal with them. But I didn't have a role model for it. So what happens a lot of times is that we often mirror the dysfunction that we experienced in, growing up.
Mm.
And sometimes we do the opposite. So sometimes we have, let's say we have a mom who wasn't a very good mom because she just wasn't available. She was emotionally distant because of her own trauma. And then what we do is we say, I will be a good parent. Above all else, I'm going to be a good parent because I didn't have that connection growing up. And we're not aware that our dysfunction growing up is driving the subconscious pattern, and then we overdo it, right? Because it's so important to our survival to heal that wound. And all of this, again, is subconscious. That's what makes this whole conversation quite complicated,
Right.
but important.
Yeah. And I think a lot of women were disempowered for, until the women's liberation movement. You think of some of the TV shows from back in the, Leave It to Beaver and all those shows. The women were they were in their role. They did what they were supposed to do, and they really didn't have much of a voice. So, women have really come a long way. And like I said, I think they did go through quite a revolution, a radical revolution. And I think men did not. And that's why I think men were kind of left behind a little bit. But I think women are more empowered than they've ever been before. But we still find a lot of women, particularly who match up with men who are sort of overly into the fix-it mode, not being able to feel their voice, to make their voice heard. And we work with women a lot to have their voice heard so they feel empowered. And have men kind of step back and hear that, which we'll talk about in a minute. So moving into
Very
what
good,
does it
Becky.
mean?
You do have another question.
Oh, okay.
So
Thanks, Joe, for that question, though.
Let's hear it.
Do you want to just tell us? Oh, here it is. Hi, this is Carol. Do you think adjusting one's expectations for emotional intimacy is important?
Also,
Always adjusting expectations is a little important because it's hard for anybody to show up perfect. For example, as a woman, I can talk with my close girlfriends about my feelings ad nauseum. But with my fiance, Carlos, I don't feel that it is fair to expect that from him. How can I be realistic and helpful in my expectations of Carlos and when it comes to emotional intimacy? What a great question.
yeah, that's a great question, Carol. Thank you.
What I love about that question is at the core of it is the assumption or the belief that I don't really need to rely on my spouse or my boyfriend or my partner for all of my emotional needs or for all my needs. And it's really hard on a spouse to meet all of our needs because we're complicated people. And that's why we have a circle of influence around us consisting of friends and so forth. And it's really important when it's our primary partner to have a certain amount of emotional connection. And I say that in the context of what that person's capable of. I mean, when I'm meeting with couples, sometimes like if somebody, I always say, if you've married somebody who's a 2 on emotional intelligence, or not emotional intelligence, the ability to be emotionally intimate, like if you want him to be an 8 or a 10, you're probably in the wrong relationship. But if you could, hi Mitch, but if you can say, I'm married at 2, and it would be so much more satisfying if I can get this 2 into like a 4 or a 5, and that would make me feel good, then, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Because that's definitely possible.
Ditto.
So realistic expectations, Carol, I think you're on the right track.
And I will say that one of the things that has saved our marriage as we try to elevate our marriage into the one we're looking for is the fact that Debbie has girlfriends, these girlfriends, just like you're saying,
I can't
Carol.
see them now.
Can't see them now.
It's kind of hard.
There's not a week that goes by where I don't say to Debbie, why don't you call Ruth? Because Ruth is that perfect person for Debbie when she wants to talk about certain things like her nails, her hair. I mean, I'm just, not there, as evolved as I am.
But what he does that works for me, and we talked about this last time, is he creates a lightness about it. So, I mean, really, hair and nails are an issue right now, at least for me. So I might comment on him. I might say, look at my nails. I don't know how much longer I can go. He can't even hear that. It's not, he doesn't know what to do with that. And so what he'll do is he'll say, Ruth.
Right.
And so it's just kind of a light reminder to me that, like, you don't want to play with me on that level. And I'm fine with that,
Right.
because it's light and it's fun.
Right. But I will say also, Carol, that, what Debbie was saying is so true. Some level of emotional intimacy has to be present. And that's really important when you are in conflict. Conflict is where emotional intimacy has to really show up. And that's when you're, needing to hear your partner really be able to listen to you. And we're going to talk about that now. We're going to talk about what it means to show up with emotional connection and emotional intimacy. And as you can imagine, listening to your partner when they're upset about something is kind of the high level of emotional intimacy, because typically it's about you, right?
So do you want to jump in?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's start talking about, and again, love these questions. So more and more, please. So let's talk a little bit, and feel free to jump in with your own ideas and thoughts about what creates more emotional intimacy in relationship. So let's go ahead and jump into it. I mean,
I kind of like to hear from everybody. Just
I would
like
too.
let's just take, a few minutes and type in, and we'll read them as they come through. Just type in your ideas based on your current relationship, or maybe a prior one.
Yeah.
But what is it that creates emotional intimacy in your mind? And we'll just read them off.
For your relationship.
In your relationship. We got nothing. Okay, we go. Okay, Andrea, helping my husband.
We won't call out the
Okay,
names.
we won't. Okay, whoa.
Well, they'll see it. Anyway.
Kindness. Being able to listen.
Yes.
Definitely.
Vulnerable conversations.
Listening and empathy.
Yes.
Yeah. Making space to be truly present.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Taking a walk together.
Yeah.
And chatting about life. Isn't it funny how so much intimacy can be created by walking? I think because we get out of our heads.
Non-judgmental.
Willingness to be vulnerable and share hurts and fears. Non-judgmental. Showing up present. Not trying to fix it, but listening. Non-judgmental.
Yes.
Being held.
Yeah. Physical contact.
Yeah. Okay,
Beautiful.
You guys have it. So this has been a nice little get together. No, I think that the core of what you're saying is basically it. I mean, those are the things to be truly present. But if we go back to what gets in the way, everything that you're saying is true, and we couldn't have said it better.
Mm-mm.
So why doesn't it work?
Undivided attention. Beautiful.
Yeah,
Yes.
being held, and I think it really does. Here we have these unconscious drives
Right.
based on our childhood. And so in relationship, we believe based on our training and our personal beliefs that in a relationship, we're really there to heal the other person. And that happens by really understanding and having an awareness of their childhood wounds.
Mm-hmm.
And once I know that, like we talked about last time about, Jack.
Mm-hmm.
Jack is in the
Mm-hmm.
room. And so because Craig had an experience with his father of Jack being judgmental, it shows up in our relationship. Well, it's really easy to react to him when he becomes Jack because it's not pretty. It's very resistant, it's very judgmental. And, I have experienced it numerous times and I react to it. But once we realized what it was, we uncovered it's really Jack, we were able to shift it by saying, something kind of light and fun, like Jack has entered the room. And once I say that, it's like Craig will say, yeah, Jack has entered the room. So he's in touch with that part of himself that he wants to heal, that he wants to um, let go of,
Mm-hmm.
and not
Mm-hmm.
be such an unconscious part of how he shows up.
Exactly.
And so, and once I see it that way, then I have more compassion for Craig.
Because she doesn't take it personally.
I don't take it personally. I have more compassion. It's like, wow, you really grew up in a tough situation.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm able to shift. But that without that understanding, I'm just in reaction.
Right.
Because what you said was completely judgmental. And then I go into my own wounds.
Right. Right.
So
a childhood wound is a trigger,
Yeah.
and I would say probably 75% of the arguments that you get into are probably from childhood triggers. And the definition of a trigger is a reaction that you're having that's touching a chord for you that's related to your childhood.
So part of intimacy is really being able to uncover that, and you really don't have to go to couples therapy to do it. One of the things that we do with our couples is have them give each other appreciations.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, one thing that you've done that really I appreciated.
Yeah.
Why that's important to me, how
Yeah.
that made me feel. And then the fourth part of that is really important, and that is, what does it remind me of that I got or I didn't get growing up? And that simple question really helps me as a spouse or a partner start to understand and unravel the onion. Like, oh, so that happened.
Right.
And once I understand that it touched you because you didn't get that growing up, now I know how to touch you. I know how to heal you.
Yeah, exactly. So can I switch? I wanted to switch to something here, because the key to being held, to being undivided attention, to being non-judgmental, all of the things that you all typed out, the key to that is validation and empathy. And I know we've touched on this before, but I think it's worthy to touch on it again.
Okay, but before you do, we have a couple things. I don't want to lose them. So one was we want the other person to change instead of being accepting of the other person's issue.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's so true. And that's that whole I'm right, you're wrong mentality, which never goes well. And, we want them to believe what we believe. Essentially, we want them to be me. You think like I think, you act like I, kind of validate what I think and believe, and don't disagree with me. Because if you disagree with me, that makes me wrong. At least that's my interpretation. And the breakdown for most couples is that they can't hold two completely different perspectives simultaneously. So they begin to react to a different perspective as if somehow you're attacking me or insulting me. So the couples that do really, really well are going to be couples who can hold two different realities, two different perspectives at the same time. And it doesn't mean I agree. I don't have to agree with you, and you don't have to agree with me.
I think at the heart of it is to say, I always say, like, at the heart, I have my loving self. And then that's my core. That's who I was when I was born. That's that baby self that's truly present and loving. And if you look around this world, like, we all have that core. even the most awful people. Maybe their core of loving self is like this, but we all have it. And the more we access it, the bigger it becomes. But overlaid in that core is what I call manifested self.
Right.
You know, that's where the ego lies, but that's also a lot of my beliefs and my values and, you know, the things that I've learned. So it's not a terrible thing, but we lose our way and we can't really care about the other person. We can't see them if I'm just operating on manifested self, because as you said, that's where it's like, it's my perspective, not your perspective, right? And so the shift is that really, you know, I always like to say it's really from head to heart. When I'm thinking things through too much, I know I'm on the wrong path.
Right.
When I'm able to look at you and see that core loving self, that's when I can open up to your perspective.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay, it looks like Craig and Debbie might have lost connection. We'll just give them a minute to get back on.
Oh, that's
Is that what's going on? I lost them too.
Yeah, I think that they lost their connection. So
Okay.
I'll just let them know. It seems to be working for everyone else.
I was going to refresh or something, but I don't know if that's the right thing to do.
No, I think everyone else is fine online. So I just sent them and let them know.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I already like left the Zoom and then came back just in case it was me, and Craig and Debbie still aren't here. So leaving won't help.
So what are you suggesting? We should leave the meeting and then come back on?
No, I think everyone can stay on actually.
Okay. Thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah, great.
Thank you.
All right, guys.
We're back.
There we go.
Hey.
Hey.
Great. I'm muting. I'm going to mute.
It's only, you know, because there's 500,000 people using Zoom at the same time.
Or you didn't upgrade.
Or I didn't upgrade. One or the other. Anyway.
Okay, so we are back. We were talking. We were just about to go have dinner because we thought, okay, they're gone. Let's go have dinner. But anyhow, we're back. So we were talking about, you know, it's very Freudian, and I think it's you know, I think it's. I just want to say that you don't have to go back to childhood wounds to create intimacy.
No, you don't. And there's one main reason why is those issues are going to play out in your relationship no matter what. And whether you label them as a childhood wound or not, you don't have to label them as Freudian or as childhood wounds.
Right.
They are going to be right in front of you. And one way or another, you're going to have to work with them, because that's what happens in relationships. We are there to heal each other's wounds. We come together in relationship. We're all broken in one way or another, not necessarily terribly, but we've all been wounded in childhood. Parents are perfect. So we all have our issues, and we come into relationship, we end up finding a partner who has the potential to heal those wounds.
I kind of like the word programmed as a hypnotherapist, but instead of childhood wounds, I think of it as more as childhood programs. Like A happened, and I learned when A happens, I do B. And I just keep practicing that. And that's why it goes into the subconscious, because I'm not even aware that when A happens, I do B. So think of it more of as a program, I think is helpful.
So fast forward, and what I want to say is that one of the things I've learned that really is the most important thing in understanding emotional intimacy. This is more than anything.
This is big.
This
What is it?
big.
It's
Ready?
really big. What is it?
Listening. Listening. And what is listening? Listening is an active experience of closing your mouth. Closing your mouth. That is very hard for a lot of people. We like to say, shut up. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But you know, we have to just stop talking so that we can first really begin to hear somebody. And then when we listen, I've read that 75% of what a person says to us while we're listening, we don't even hear. So it's very interesting that look at the way your brain works. Just look at it for a second, okay? Somebody's talking to you and you're already thinking about how you're going to respond to them while they're speaking to you. You're forming opinions in your mind about what they're saying. You're forming judgments.
Lots of good stuff is happening.
What they're saying. You're not really present, fully present.
That's where I get my best ideas.
While I'm talking, she's
Exactly.
off somewhere. So the thing about listening is it's very difficult. It's not so simple. So there is a way to listen, and we've talked about this before, and that's if you would mirror your partner. So what I hear you saying is, and you just say back to them what you hear them saying. It's called mirroring.
It's so important because the mind moves faster than we can talk, and that's where the breakdown happens. I've got a lot of time while you're talking. My mind can go so much faster.
Yeah.
So if you give the mind a job, and that is to repeat back, now my mind is really busy paying attention. And that's why it works so well.
And it works well also because the other person who's talking feels listened to. They actually feel heard when you repeat back to them and say, so what I hear you saying is blah, blah, blah. Did I get that? And it's such a refreshing feeling, you know, to be heard, to be listened to. And that's what I mean by you see me, you're hearing me. But that's just the first step. The next two steps are so important. They go together. Validation and empathy. That is so deep, okay? When you say to your partner, you know, you make sense. I've listened carefully to what you have to say, and I understand your perspective. It doesn't mean you agree with them. It just means that you can actually cross a bridge and put yourself in their shoes. And you can say, wow, you make sense. And wow, what a refreshing experience that is to hear that. That is connection. That is emotional intimacy at its best.
And the other part that I think is really important is, and what makes sense is, it can make sense what you're saying. What makes sense is, I may not agree with it, but it does make sense.
Yeah. And then of course, empathy, you know, a person who's truly connected emotionally, the person who's being heard is going to feel empathized with. Empathy is lacking in our culture. It's not just men, it's all of us, especially it's something that we all have the capacity for, but a lot of us are lacking it and a lot of us haven't really learned it. So empathy is just listening with your heart. It's understanding what your partner is feeling, you know, and telling them that you understand how they're feeling. I see that you're feeling hurt. Is that what you're feeling? It's a guess, you don't know. I see that you're feeling sad.
Is that what you're feeling?
I see that you're feeling frustrated.
Is that what you're feeling? It's important to check it out because we can say things, but if we're not right, and we assume we're right, then we create a lack of connection.
Yeah. So this is key to emotional connection, being heard, being seen. We talked about that. That's almost the definition of emotional intimacy. Being heard, being seen, feeling connected, feeling safe. The other side to that is the speaker, not the listener. The speaker has to feel safe to actually tell you what they're thinking and feeling. And a lot of people did not grow up in an environment where it was safe to say what you were thinking and feeling. And so it's hard. It's hard. But if you're open and you're safe, if I'm creating a safe space for you to do that, I'm going to feel like I can test the waters, and I'm going to start telling you what I think and feel. And then you have to be ready to just hear that. But the speaker has to really, and both of you in every relationship, friendships, parents and children, lovers, have to be comfortable sharing their thoughts and feelings. And one other thing, their needs, what I need from you.
You know, I think last time we touched on bids for attention. I'm just going to bring it up again because I think that it's so important to be able to understand what a bid is and how to respond to one.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, last time we talked about a bid for attention is anything that I do to get your attention. So it could be a question. It could be just coming in the room and saying, how you doing? It could be just coming up and touching you. It could be saying something provocative and mean,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But it's basically my intention is to get your attention.
That's right.
And John Gottman found through his research that if I turn away against a bid for attention, if I walk in the room if you walk in the room and I say, I'm busy, I can't talk right now, it's turning against it. When we turn against a lot of bids for attention, that's where the relationship breaks down. And that's where divorce happens. And he found this, like, what was the statistic?
It's crazy, like 80%.
Yeah. So it's just really important to pay attention to when your partner is needing you, to listen to you, to, you know, whatever it is, whatever little bid they make, to respond to it positively. And we can't get all of them, but we can get a lot.
Because what you really are saying with emotional intimacy is, I've got your back. I've got your back.
Yeah, and you're important to
I'm
me.
here
And I care
for you.
about you, even if it's not convenient.
Yeah.
And I can't respond to all the bids,
Yeah.
but my intention and my desire
Mhm.
is to be there for you, even when it's tough.
Right. So we got one more question. How can we start strengthening our empathy muscles?
That's a good
And
one.
are there little things we can do to practice mirroring and active listening so that when a conflict or trigger arises, we have some programming in place to handle it? In terms of strengthening empathy muscles, I think, you know, there's a lot of things you can do. One of them is practice with listening. So, you know, a lot of times I don't want to listen to Debbie, but she's upset. And there's, you know, it's a cost benefit analysis. I make it in my head really quickly. I mean, I can fight back.
You can miss my bid.
I could miss her bit. I could fight back. I could not listen. And the argument's not going to end. It's going to go badly from there and things aren't going to. So my assessment is I am way better off if I can just listen. So practicing listening without speaking, but active listening, not like pretending you're listening, but you're not really. Like just actually listening and repeating back. You can practice that with each other. And you tell your partner, I'm going to be practicing mirroring with you so they don't feel like you're just, you know, kind of treating them like a robot. You let them know what you're doing. So that's one thing you can do.
Well, I just want to say that, you know, it's usually not just one person that's not good at it. It's both people. We're all not very good at it. So the question is a great one. And I would say, like, if you're having dinner, just say, let's practice that mirroring thing.
Yeah.
Just during dinner. Let's just have fun with it. And I always say, like, whatever you're going to do, like, play and have fun. Make it fun.
Right.
And so we're just going to, like, mirror over dinner. Like, how strange is that? But it becomes a fun activity. I mean, what else do we have to do right now?
I have another suggestion, though. This is really my all-time favorite suggestion for cultivating empathy. I love questions, asking questions. Asking questions is so profoundly powerful. People don't realize it, but they have to have a couple things connected to it. They have to be open-ended questions, so you can't ask a yes or no. And they've got to be somewhat provocative, where you're asking something that you're really curious about and you want to know about your partner. And it should be something you do every day, because we should be curious about each other. We never want to ever get to the point where we feel we know our partner so well that we stop asking questions.
You know, sorry.
So I want to just give a couple of questions. Some of my favorite, most important questions. I'll be done. One is, One is, what can I do to make your day a little easier? I love that question. What can I do to make your day a little easier? I think having a question about what's your biggest stressor right now? What are you going through? What's your biggest stressor? What is your biggest joy right now? What are you so happy about? You know, these just examples, but you can come up with your own,
Here's
and they
another
create
one.
intimacy.
Here's another one. So what's one thing that you don't know about me right now, but if you did, it would strengthen our relationship? It's a little bit deeper.
Yeah, yeah. So, and John Gottman, if you go on his website, he's a famous relationship therapist. He has questions that you can download on your app. It's an app you can download to your phone and just have them there whenever you're with each other. And that's a fun thing to do at dinner when you're just hanging out together.
So it looks like we're out of time.
Yeah.
But let's just see.
But he wanted to know one other thing. Are there other things we can do to practice more active listening so that when a conflict or trigger arises,
I think it's just, I think it's practice, you know.
Practicing it when there's not a trigger.
Right, exactly. And making it fun. Like, because if it's not fun, you're not going to do it.
Yeah. You got to practice it. Like one way to practice it, I'll highly recommend, is have what we call a stress reducing conversation once a day. And that is, you're not talking about something between you. You're just talking about a stressor that you're having in your life.
Right.
And have your partner mirror back to you. So you get some practice.
And, you know, every night you could just play with, let's ask each other, of all the questions that we put together, let's address one, or let's address two of them. Sometimes I have clients put it on a note card, like 3 questions, and play the note card game. And that's really helpful. So putting some structure around it. And then finally, so you guys are both
Thank
great.
you.
This is why we have the 4 questions on Passover. It's so true, right? It's so true.
Okay, everyone. Are there any final questions before we close out tonight? I hope we were able to at least give you a little bit of information that is helpful. It's such an important topic. I can't say enough about it.
I have a practice question that I was going to type out, but it's just too long. I'd rather just ask it.
Yes. Sounds like Emma.
This is Emma. I follow this couple on Instagram. They're like a famous Instagram couple. They're really both very attractive, but they say that a good practice in their eyes to cultivate emotional intimacy is to share and exchange 3 turn-ons, like things that turn you on, that make you feel alive and excited, and then 3 turn-offs that make you feel like down and depleted. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't necessarily mean anything sexual, but it's like, for example, you know, the man in the relationship was saying, like, you know, working out is a huge turn on for him. You know, that makes him feel good. And it also helps the wife, it helps the other partner, it helps both partners be able to support them, the other partner more, if they know that what is, you know, they know their turn on. So I just wanted to offer and see what you guys thought about that. I think I tagged you both in that on Instagram.
Yeah.
That was a good one.
I like that. I like that a lot. I think on the turn offs, I don't know. I think I might turn it into one request rather than a turn off, because it could be a little triggering, you know, depending on who your partner is. But if you don't think it is, then that's great. But a lot of things that we want more of, they're just really requests. I think a turn off could sound like a complaint. But again, that's individual.
Yeah, I think the questions are fantastic. I would add it to my list of questions for sure.
Yeah.
I think it does border on, and not that you intended it this way, Emma, but we didn't talk about sexual intimacy today. And that's a whole nother topic. There are many types of intimacy. And I think we will speak about sexual intimacy in another session, because it's critical. And somebody did mention touch, not that that's necessarily leading to sexual intimacy, but touching is really, really important for emotional intimacy. You know, Chapman's 5 Love Languages, most of you have probably read that book, and touch is one of his 5 love languages. Yeah. And we want to make sure that, you know, sometimes all that's necessary when we need some emotional intimacy is a hug. You know, we just got to remember that.
So what I would say, there's a big gap between knowing and doing. And based on your comments, you guys know a lot. So the question is, what's one thing, and this is a question just for two of you, or if you're not with your partner, to discuss with him at a later time. What's one thing that you can do that if you did would create more emotional intimacy in your relationship? Because the rubber hits the road when you start creating new habits, new actions, new ideas. And as always, just have fun with it. Because I think that's what we're here for, is to have fun.
Yes. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next
So
Monday.
we love you. Thanks so much for joining in. It's so good to see all of you. We've got some new people. So we look forward to seeing you next Monday.
Thanks, Erica.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.